Welcome to the Gear Highlights section of the Danger Close podcast. And because I had my friend Dr. David Kilcullen on this podcast, I wanted to talk about his books a little bit more. I talked about them quite a bit during the podcast, but every student of warfare needs to have these books, not just in their library, but they need to be read. They need to be highlighted. They need to be revisited. I can't stress that enough. And if you're not signed up for my reading list selections every month, I have a reading list selection that comes out. You can sign up for my newsletter on the blog section of my website there. And each month I take 6. And some of those are books that come from the professional reading list that I was asked to put together for the Naval Special Warfare Center before I left the SEAL teams. And others are books that influenced me on some way along my journey. And I'll tell you what, these books have all influenced not just me, but an entire generation of combat leaders. And David Kilcullen is the main driving force behind that impact and that influence. So, get these books. Can't recommend them enough. The Dragons and the Snakes. When I sat down to write The Devil's Hand, I jumped right into this book, and this really helped focus me along the path as I was putting that book together, as I was putting myself in the enemy's shoes, looking back on particularly the last 20 years and what they've learned by watching us on the field of battle for those last 20 years. So David Kilcullen does that in this book at a strategic and tactical level for those who are interested, which should be everybody, because going forward, we have some challenges ahead, as we discuss in the podcast. So the Dragons and the Snakes, definitely pick this up. Usually I tell people to start at the beginning with Accidental Guerrilla, but I think jump in with this one because it is so timely. So the Dragons and the Snakes, and for sure pick up Counterinsurgency. And this one right here goes into the background behind the 28 articles of counterinsurgency, which we talked about on the podcast. So once again, required reading for students of war. Blood Year, for sure. You can see all these. I don't even know why I highlight them, because the whole book ends up being highlighted. So Blood Year, Out of the Mountains. I'm actually quoted in here, which was such an honor for me. And we're going to talk about each and every one of these books, I hope, in separate podcasts going forward, because there's so much to talk about. And the Accidental Guerrilla right here. So amazing work. David, thank you so much for writing these. And on the podcast, we talk about a couple other books. Rise and Kill First, which if you've been following along, you know, influenced me as I wrote The Devil's Hand. So as you can tell, those yellow stickies again. This is another book that ended up getting quite a few highlights here. So absolutely fantastic. We talked about the Counterinsurgency Field Manual, his involvement with this. So also, although some parts of it maybe, things have evolved quite a bit, because the enemy, as we talked about on the podcast, is always adapting. We're always adapting to the enemy. They're always adapting to us. So this should be in everyone's library as well. And what I didn't get to ask David about, because I didn't get to any of my questions, because we just started talking, is Unrestricted Warfare here. And this one really is I think it's a paper that was written by 2 Chinese military officers, I think around 1999. I might be wrong with that date, 98, 99, somewhere. But in the US, it says 2002 right here, but it was written earlier than that. But I want to talk to him about this, about how this was interpreted in the United States, and some of the, I think some things we can learn from this. So we'll talk about that next time. And when David was talking about how he created those 28 articles of counterinsurgency, well, he was at the Starbucks in the Pentagon, and it happened because somebody had another meeting. They couldn't make it to meet him. So he took out his black Moleskin notebook, and he wrote those down. So a notebook just like this one. So I always have a notebook with me no matter where I go, always writing down those notes, those ideas, usually as they pertain to future novels these days. But I've graduated from this size to this size. This one from SIG. Thank you, SIG. But I love this. So each and every book gets its own notebook like this. So I have one for each of the novels thus far, and this one is going to be for this 5th novel that I'm writing. I have all sorts of notes in here, and very cool. This pen right here, Kelly Slaten. So he's at Kelly Slaten on Instagram and at Palmetto Patriot Flags. But this pen, awesome. Thank you for making this pen. It means a lot to me. And this is the one that's going to take a ton of notes here as I get deeper and deeper into writing and the edits for book 5, Title Classified. So sincerely appreciate that. Thank you so much. And in these novels, or not novels, these books here, obviously Osama bin Laden is mentioned, Al Qaeda is mentioned. There's a lot of information about that terrorist organization and how it's evolved from. I think their first meeting was, I think, in 1988. You can fact check me on that, but so much has happened over the years, obviously. But this right here, this is from my friend James Yeager, and this is the original wanted poster for Osama bin Laden. You can see the U right there because you see that he's called UBL when you're talking about him, not OBL. So this is the U spelling right there. Wanted by the FBI, murder of U.S. nationals outside of the United States, conspiracy to murder U.S. nationals outside the United States, attack on a federal facility resulting in death. And the date on this thing is March 29th, 1999. So James Yeager at Tactical Response, thank you so much for sending this. That means a lot to me that you'd send this to me. Sincerely appreciate it, my friend. So there we go. I think that's everything. All right. Get reading.